Hi. So I hope your prompt went well. Um, Duende. Um, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to read from the quotation from Tracy K Smith, which is on your handout. Now, first of all, I'll say Tracy K Smith was the Poet Laureate of the United States, and she is, I believe, a university professor at Princeton University, who is quite an amazing poet. So she says some things about the duende, and I'm going to read this. So notice a few of the things that I said before. I'm trying to outline what the duende is. So think of the duende as kind of hobgoblin spirit, and you can ask yourself whether a work of art contains it or not. So you can say, if you look at a picture of a Disney princess, you might say, that doesn't really have duende. And somebody will say, what do you mean? Well, you can say it doesn't have fire. It doesn't have struggle. It doesn't have any of the darker side of life in it. So that's kind of what we mean when we talk about duende. So the sense of struggle. And then notice in this quotation, in the second paragraph, she talks about two different worlds, the daytime logic and the nighttime logic. So let me read this, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the daytime logic and the nighttime logic. So this is Tracy K. Smith. I love this concept of duende because it supposes that our poems are not things we create in order that a reader might be pleased or impressed, or, if you will, delighted or instructed. We write poems in order to engage in the perilous yet necessary struggle to inhabit ourselves, our real selves, the ones we barely recognize, more completely. It is then that the duende beckons, promising to impart something newly created like a miracle. Then it winks inscrutably and begins its games of feint and dodge, lunge and parry, goad and shirk, turning its back, nearly disappearing altogether, then materializing again with a bear hug that drops you to the ground and knocks your wind out. You'll get your miracle, but only if you can decipher the music of the battle, only if you're willing to take risk after risk, only, in other words, if you survive the effort. For a poet, this kind of survival is tantamount to walking, word by word, onto a ledge of your own making. You must use the tools you brought with you, but in decidedly different and dangerous ways. So let me comment on that this idea that you have to be battling if you're a poet. If you're a poet, I think you have to be trying to face the difficult parts of life and to talk about them. If something bad happens to you, you don't just crumble, but you take the bad thing that's happened to you and you turn it into a song. You use it. And so, it's like the idea of if somebody punches you, you don't just kind of absorb it and feel sad. They punched me. It's almost like you take the energy of the punch and you kind of use that energy to make art. So the idea of duende is it's like taking all the dark forces of the world around us and pouring it, like not retaining it in ourselves, but letting it out into artwork. Okay? So there is struggle around us already. What do we do with that struggle? Do we absorb it? We can feel like victims and we can feel tired and depressed, or we can pour it out into our art. So it's that spirit there. So I'll read the second paragraph of Tracy K. Smith. If all this is true, and I believe it is, this struggle is not merely to write well-crafted and surprising poems, so much as to survive in two worlds at once. The world we see, the one made of people, weather, and hard facts, that, for all its wonders and disappointments, has driven us to the page in the first place, and the world beyond or within this one, that, glimpse after glimpse, we attempt to decipher and confirm. Survival in the former is predicated on balance, perspective, rehearsal, breadth of knowledge, and experience. It's possible to get by as a poet with those things alone. Many do. A healthy ego doesn't hurt. But for someone fully convinced of the duende, it's the latter world which matters more. The world where madness and abandon often trump reason, and where skill is only useful to the extent that it adds courage and agility to your intuition. She's a good writer, isn't she? Um, so I'd like to refer to these two worlds that she talks about: the world we see and the world beyond that. So the world we see, we can think of this as a kind of daytime, and there's a daytime logic that we can use to get through it. So this is, I take a trolley to work down the block. This is the part of my brain which has to get to the trolley on time and have my little card and pay with it and get my body onto a seat and then get my body to work, that takes care of ourselves. This is daytime logic. It's very practical. It's like the left side of the brain. But the nighttime logic is more like the kind of logic from dreams. And, when you're going to sleep, there's the kind of liminal feeling you have. You start to have strange images and strange thoughts come into your head. Well, you can think of this as a kind of a reverie, it's called, from the French rêve, like dream. So a reverie, it's almost like the deep time that we all feel. Certain times, maybe maybe you've had a long day and you're just kind of staring out the window for a little while and you go quite far away. Or you're looking at a painting that you love and it takes you to a different place. Now this is a very subjective experience. It's a very internal experience, and I can't tell you what you should be feeling, and it's hard for me to express what it is that I'm feeling. But it's this latter, this nighttime logic, this liminal experience, which is what the Duende is about. So if you can separate it that way, the logical part of the literal, what you do during your day, is not really what we're talking about with the Duende. With the Duende, we're talking about more surreal logic. So kind of darker nighttime logic. All right? Now, I'm going to give you an example of a poem which I really like, which is, it seems like daytime, but I think actually what's happening is nighttime. It's quite dark. So this should be in your packet. It's called Sixth Grade by Marie Howe. The afternoon, the neighborhood boys tied me and Mary Lou Mather to Donnie Ralph's father's garage doors, spread-eagled. It was the summer they chased us almost every day. Careening across the lawns they'd mowed for money on bikes they threw down. They'd catch us, lie on top of us, then get up and walk away. The afternoon, Donnie's mother wasn't home. His 9 sisters and brothers gone, even Gramps, who lived with them. Gone somewhere, the backyard empty, big house quiet. A gang of boys. They pulled the heavy garage doors down and tied us to them with clothesline. And Dottie got the deer's leg severed from the buck his dad had killed the year before, dried up and still fur-covered, and sort of poked it at us, dancing around the blacktop in his sneakers, laughing. Then somebody took it from Donnie and did it. And then someone else, and someone after him. Then Donnie pulled up Mary Lou's dress and held it up, and she began to cry. And I became a boy again, and shouted, "Stop!" But they wouldn't. Then a girl boy calling out to Charlie, my best friend's brother, who wouldn't look, "Charlie!" To my brother's friend who knew me, "Stop them!" And he wouldn't. And then more softly, and looking directly at them, I said, "Charlie." And he said, "Stop." And they said, "What?" And he said, "Stop it." And they did, quickly, untying the ropes, weirdly quiet. Mary Lou still weeping. And Charlie, already gone. So you can see in this poem, it starts out with just a bunch of kids hanging around, and maybe it starts innocent, but then it gets dark very quickly. And the boys are all of a sudden against the girls, and there's a deer leg, and they're poking each other with it. So I feel like the daytime logic of the kids just being together and being innocent is quickly overrun by the nighttime logic of how dangerous and violent this scene could become. Now, for your next prompt, I'd like you to think of a scenario in your life where something, it could be from the past, it could be one like this, something from the past, like when you were a child, or it could be something more recent. So it could be something which kind of didn't seem violent, but then it became more violent. Or you could just think of something really wonderful and then think of a shadow coming across it. So I'm giving you two options for this workshop. Either think of a traumatic experience like the Marie Howe one that happened to you and write a poem which is in the spirit of the Marie Howe poem, or think of something which you love, which could be just a thing. It could be your cat, or it could be your record player, or it could be your computer. And then imagine a shadow falling across it, because that's kind of what the Duende is. It's like a shadow. And so the shadow represents the thing being taken away from you. So it could be something that you love with a shadow coming across it. Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes to do one of those two workshops, and then I'll continue.